Hello, in this video I'm going to be working on the property tax problem in Unit 4. I'm going to work on both the pseudocode and on the Visual Basic program. Let's begin by looking at the problem description. It says create a pseudocode and/or flowchart solution to this problem. I'm going to work on a flowchart because that works better for me, but you can also do this as pseudocode. And please notice that this part of it says you do not have to write the application, that you will do it in the next step. All right, so the problem breakdown is, it says local government collects property taxes on the assessed value of property. The assessed value of property is 60% of the actual market value of the property. The property is taxed at a rate of 70 cents for each $100 of assessed value. So for example, if the actual value of a piece of property is $50,000, we calculate the assessed value and the property tax as follows. So the assessed value equals 50,000 times the 0.6, because we're taxing at a 60% rate, which is 30,000. The tax rate then is the assessed value divided by 100 times 0.7. Now the reason we're dividing by 100 is because we're charging 70 cents for each $100 of assessed value. So we need to divide by that in order to come up with that 0.7. So if we substitute this 30,000 into that spot, divide by 100, multiply by 0.7, we'll come up with a tax rate of $210. All right, so let's try to sketch that out. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to see if I can keep this up on the screen as well. So I'm just going to kind of shift it over a little bit so that I can see this portion of it. And then I've opened up PowerPoint and created a new slideshow. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to get rid of these default boxes. And if you're wondering, I just created a blank slideshow just with a white background. All right, so let's maximize that in height, and let's shift it over a little bit so we can see the other window. So let's begin by putting in a box that says begin. And let's see, let's work with this shape here. So just way up at the top, I'm just going to do a thing that says begin. And then the next step is to get input from the user, and what we're going to ask for is the assessed value of the property. So let's find our parallelogram here. And we'll just say input assessed value. Make that a little wider. What I'm trying to do now is, I think there might have a carriage return in there. There we go. That was kind of messing up the placement. All right, so we got the assessed value, and really from there on in, all the other stuff is calculations that happen behind the scenes. So now we can start to drop in rectangles to do our calculations. So let's create one. And now one of the interesting things here is when we look at these equations, if you notice, we can really kind of break this down and do the whole thing really in one equation. So we don't have to, oops, I'm sorry, touch screen. We don't have to take this part and do it separately to come up with assessed value. We can just input the assessed value and drop it into this formula where these two numbers are going to be consistent, and then we'll come up with the property tax. So it's really actually a pretty simple little problem. So what we're going to do here is now we're just going to type in property tax equals assessed value divide by 100 multiply by 0.7. And that's really it. And then we just do our output. So let's throw in that shape real quick. And I'm going to copy this shape. And we'll change the text. And just do a little bit of arrangement. So you can see here, my intent is not to have this be difficult, but kind of just to get you into the mindset of like how do we solve this problem? How do we convert it to an actual application? And then to kind of take the little bit of the challenge or the mystery out of the fact that it's really not that hard to do. Of course, some of our problems will be getting a little bit more difficult now, but not really quite so bad even, because we're learning technique more than anything else. And then I'm just going to drop in my arrows. Okay, and then that would complete it. And the way I would do this at this point, if I was going to drop it into to Word, the one way would be I could do a screen capture. So I could do a snip, use my snipping tool, create a new one, grab that, click the copy button, create a new Word document, and we'll make a blank one. I'll throw in a title, and really we should probably bump that up in size a little bit. Maybe make it bold. We can paste in our snip, copy, do a paste, and that's pretty much it right there. So it's not, you can see it's not very difficult. I would save this and upload it, and then consider the assignment done. Okay, so that ends part one of this. Now I'm going to go ahead and get these windows out of the way. And now what we're going to do is we're going to actually go ahead and create the application. So I'm going to launch Visual Studio, bring that up on screen. And we are going to create a new project. We do want a Visual Basic Windows Form application. I'm going to give this a name. I'm going to call it Property Tax. And it looks like this location is just fine. I'm not creating a separate directory for the solution. I'm just going to click OK. And that will build the structure of an application. Now, one thing that I want to do before I put anything on the form, and we really haven't talked about this yet, but it's very good practice to do what they call a clean build for an application. Now, that is kind of the equivalent of when you create a new file in any other program and you do a save as right away, which maintains its original state. Now, whenever you have an application that you're building within an environment like this, and every time you hit that start button, and really what that does is it runs the debugger, checks for errors, and then in the background it builds an entire file structure that makes the program run. So it's not just a couple little things that you created, but all the supporting components that are created. Now, by just clicking the start button right now, it goes through and it does that exact process. It builds all the files in the background, even though we're not necessarily going to interact with them directly. Now they're all present. So I'm just going to go ahead and click stop. And what's going to happen now is we have that kind of that solid starting point that's already there. All the components are already built. So when we go to subsequently do it, it goes a little bit quicker, although you might not notice it on the outset. Now, if you're curious, where are all those files that I'm talking about? When we're working in a project, our typical view is this, what we see right here, which basically shows us all the key files that we're working with. And here's the form that we have up on the screen, and then all the subcomponents of the form. And you can see there's some things here, and it's like, oh, I'm not even sure what these are, but they're parts of the form. But there is a little icon here on the toolbar, and you should always explore this stuff if you can. But there's one that says Show All Files, and if I click that, you're going to see that these are the actual additional files that will appear in your folder. And if you start pulling these apart, you're going to see that there's all sorts of stuff that's in there. And one of the ones that, of course, is important here is the actual executable that we created just by doing the debug. Now notice it is in the debug folder because it shows that we're in the process of building it. But once you actually finish your application, you would actually create an executable that you could, lift up and put anywhere you want to run. All right, I'm going to actually turn that off because we really don't need to see that. But let's go ahead and start building the form components. Right now you can see I have the form highlighted. I'm just going to come up here and give that a name. I'm going to call it property tax calculator. Sorry, saying it so goofy. Oh yeah, and that's very silly on my part. This is just, it's not the name that's going to appear up here. That's just the name of the object within the code. So really the correct way to do this is to do a FRM. Let's do prop tax, and that should be good. Now we do want to put a little text up at the top. So here's where we can actually insert spaces. We can say property tax calculator. Okay, so there you go. All right, so let's figure out how many input fields we're going to need, and I think that's pretty obvious. Just one is going to be adequate. I am going to drop in a label, and good habit tells us that we should label it LBL title. The text inside the title is going to say, same as the title bar, and maybe we can bump up the font size a little bit. Maybe a 12 is adequate. All right, and then we're going to need another label, and let's put in a text box. The label we are going to call LBL assessed. And here I'm also going to say a little bit more than just assessed value. We'll say enter assessed value. So it's kind of giving a little bit of direction at the same time. So let's move these so that they're sitting nicely with each other. All right, now let's name this text box here, and let's call that TXT assessed. And for output, why don't we go ahead and use a list box. And hopefully you'll see the rationale behind this. Basically, it's that way I can do a little bit more verbose output, so provide a little bit more detail than just this is how much your property tax is. That one, let's call LST output. We're not going to have anything in there. And then we're going to need two buttons. In this case, I'm going to do two double clicks. There's one button. There's another button. And if you haven't figured out, one's going to be the calculate. I suppose we can do a clear button. So let's put in a third and make an exit button too. All right, so we're going to go through and just kind of name all these. So BTN, I'm just going to call it calc. The next one is btn clear. The next one will be btn exit. All right, then let's go down here and name each one. So we can do exit, but I'm going to put the ampersand in front of it so the person can do an Alt X to exit. Let's also call this one clear, and let's put that in front of the L. So the hotkey will be the L. And then for this button, this will be calculate. And let's do with that one, let's put in, well, actually we won't put an ampersand in front of anything. We'll set this as our accept button. Now, to remember what that means whatever button or whatever button we want to react to the key press of the enter key, we need to set that on the form level. So I'm going to click on the form so you can see the handles on the side, and then there I'm going to scroll up and find the thing that says accept button, and then of course I can choose my calculate button. And now you can see, of course, the slight blue outline. All right, let's start with the easy stuff. Let's go ahead and program the exit button. And if you remember the magical code here, it's me.close with parens at the end. I'm just making a little bit of space here in the code file. Since we've done a number of changes now, it's probably a good idea to hit the save all. All right, and then let's go back to the form, and then let's program the clear button. So let's get these easy actions out of the way first. So the first thing that we're going to need to do is we need to clear the assessed value. So we can say the txt assessed dot text is going to be equal to nothing. And then we're also going to say that the list box output will be cleared. And I didn't use exactly the right syntax here. And the actual correct syntax is items clear, to get that to work. So one thing that we can do is let's go ahead and save this. Oh, and notice that it did put in the parens for me automatically. Sometimes I forget to do that. So let's run it. Let's make sure the exit button works. It does. Let's run it again. And let's type some stuff in. And yes, with this we'll only see it clear the one, but it does seem to work. All right, so now let's program the calculate button. We do need to close that first in order to make that happen. So let's go back to the form, take a quick look, and then let's also look at our pseudocode here. So we're going to get the input of the assessed value. We have that set up, and then we just have to do this simple calculation. Now, notice what I'm doing, even though this is not going to directly work in the code. I am going to copy it and bring it into the code as a comment, so I have it as a point of reference. Let's double-click the calculate button so it auto creates that structure for us. Make a little space in there, and I'm just going to type in an apostrophe and then paste that in so I just have it as a reference. Now, I am going to zoom in a little bit here for you guys so you can read that a little bit better, hopefully. All right, so let's start by creating a variable. Let's call that dim, and we're going to need something that's going to grab the assessed value. So let's just call it assessed. And let's just agree that we're going to input it as an integer. We're not going to worry about cents in this case. And it's probably not a bad idea to just preset it to 0. All right, let's preset that to 0. And then we're also going to need a place to store the result of the calculation. So we need to create another variable, and this one we'll just call property tax as a double. And let's also preset that to 0 just to be on the safe side. Now you can see I have some coding habits from other languages where I always put in semicolons at the end, so if you're wondering, okay, because I do a lot of other languages too where that's required. All right, so we got those two in, and now we're just simply going to do our input. So we got to get that input from the user. So let's go ahead and we're going to do something new here too, just that I haven't done in previous videos, but we have talked about it in some of the lectures. And that is, we are going to take the input from this text box, convert it to a number, and then place it into the variable. And I'll show you that in just a moment here. So let's go ahead and do that part. So let's just say that assessed is going to be equal to the text box assessed dot text. But we're going to assume that that option strict thing that we talked about isn't activated, or isn't, excuse me, deactivated. So we're going to do a C int and put parens around this. So whatever we grab, we're going to convert to an integer and then store it here in assessed. Then we're going to do our actual calculation. And then notice how I'm going to do this. This is really close to what I've named the variable up top. So I should be able to just make a couple of tweaks here. And that should do the math. Now we want to go ahead and put into our output box here we need parentheses. And what are we going to add? Let's put in some descriptive text and just let's start simple. Let's just say property tax is, leave that just like that, and then we're going to concatenate a format currency where it's going to style the output of property tax and close our parens. Okay, so that should be pretty simple. Let's go ahead, save everything, and let's give this a shot. So let's start the program. And okay, so this is great because usually I do these and I never run into any errors. So now this is going to show to me what our issue is. So it's saying that it's expecting a closing parentheses. And notice it still ran the program, which isn't a good thing because if there's a mistake. And I did put a closing parenthesis there, right? Well, that's the one that goes here, but I'm missing the one that matches that one. So when you get these errors, you need to stop and pause for a second and think about, what is it actually saying? And now you can see the little underline went away as well. So once again, we're going to save. We're going to click Start. Let's put in the same numbers that we had in the pseudocode. So that was, I think, 30,000, no, 50,000 of assessed value. So let's go ahead and type in 50,000. I'm going to press enter, and there's our property tax, which is seemingly incorrect. Am I right? Apparently so. It doesn't match up what we did before. What we did before indicates to us that it should be $210. So now it's up to us to figure out, why is that the case? Is there some sort of math here That's wrong. Are we missing a step? So that should make you start scratching your head. Did we miss a step here somewhere? We did. We did miss a step. And it actually goes right back to the pseudocode. So this is why we try to work out this issue. Because remember, the assessed value, and I see that I mistyped it here, is what we're getting. But apparently we need something else in between here. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to copy this and paste it. I'll pull it off to the side for a second, because really the part that we skipped was this conversion right here. And maybe the names that we use here aren't quite right. So input, not assessed value. Maybe we should call this market value. And then I'm going to move these things down. Oops. Let's try that again. Let's delete that arrow. So we're going to move this down. And this is actually kind of backwards from the way we should be doing it. Now, if I did my pseudocode and then I put some numbers in to test it to make sure my formulas are working, I would have just avoided the problem that I encountered. So this is really a great example of why we want to work out the pseudocode first. Because what we're trying to do here is get our assessed value. So I'm going to cut that, put it on this side, and then insert here. It's the market value, and then I'm looking on this side of the screen now. I'm not going to keep that formula where I'm going to multiply times 0.6. So I would do times 0.6. Now, one thing that you could also do is you could take this little snippet and insert that in place of assessed value. And if you're not wondering already, that's exactly what I'm going to do in my code. But in my pseudocode, I'm going to do this because it helps me to make sure that every step is accounted for. So there's my alteration. So now that will work. So now if we go back to Visual Studio and then understand that here, instead of getting assessed value, we are actually going to get market value. So we need to insert another variable here. So we're going to do a... Now notice I'm trying to type and nothing's happening, and that's because the program is still running, which I can tell because the pause and the stop buttons are available. So I'm going to hit stop. Now I can do the declaration, and I'm just going to call it market as integer. We're going to preset it to 0. And now assessed, I'm going to switch that now to a double. And the reason for that is because a percentage of something might end up being dollars and cents. Not likely, but it's possible. Therefore, this is going to have to switch to a double, C double, and this is going to be set to market. Now, I could now take this little spot here and say, and do something like this. Market times 0.6, and I could even put that in parentheses and then do the equation, and it will work out just fine. But one reason why I might want to leave assessed here, in fact I should probably just Control Z to do that. So I'm just doing a series of undos, and I didn't realize I was going to do one keystroke at a time. Is because I might want to use the assessed value as part of the output. So I might say assessed equals market, spelled correctly, times 0.6. All right, so let's go ahead and save that. And then I'm also going to say this in part of the output. So I'm actually going to add a little bit to the output. I'll just say the assessed value is, and then once again I'm using the whole format currency. Okay, let's go ahead and save it. Run it. So now let's type in that 50,000, press enter, and now that is what we were looking for. So that's good. So let's go ahead and exit. And then let's just experiment a little bit with that option strict thing, because I remember I added this thing here that converts it to a double as it comes in. So what we want to do is we actually want to tweak that option. And so I'm going to the Tools menu and Options. Okay, I thought I maybe had paused there, but apparently not. So once again, Tools, Options, and then we need to find the spot here for that particular setting. Now, if you remember from the videos that we were looking for or working with earlier, where we talk about how to get there in the PowerPoints, there's a few different settings that you can go into here, and you can go through and just look at all the stuff that you can do. I mean, it's kind of mind-boggling actually how many different settings there are. Okay. And all right, so the spot where we're going to find what we need in this case is we go up to Projects and Solutions and click on VB Defaults, and right here where it says Option Strict is off. In this case, we're going to switch it to on, which is generally what you want to use when you're coding to make sure that the input that you're getting is good and you're not counting on Visual Basic itself to do the conversions, because you don't often know if it's going to do it right. So we're going to switch that to on, and then we're going to make sure everything's saved, and it is, and we're going to start, and we're going to type in that same amount now. Press enter. You can see it still works. Okay, so you're saying, well, what's the point of that? Well, let's see what happens if we delete that conversion. Let's save it and run it now. Okay, it still works, but what happens if I throw in a decimal number? It still works. So apparently that conversion is not very important. However, if I type in some text, okay, the program crashed. Now, watch what happens here when we hover. It talks about the error, and it says make sure the source type is convertible to the destination type. So it recognizes that it's going from text to a number. So that is one of the reasons why we do that conversion in here, because it makes sure that we do it correctly. So let's go ahead. I'm just going to Control Z here to get it back to where it was. And we're going to save. And basically we're going to call our project done at this point. Now if I'm to work on doing my screenshots for this, I would close all these extra little windows here, or move them down so I can fit it all in. So I would grab a screenshot of all the code. And if you want a demo on that, I can just show you really quick. I just do a new clip with the snipping tool. Just highlight the code. And I would hit copy, and I would paste it into my other document. And then I would also go into the form view here, but what I would do is I would have the program run. So let's go ahead and make sure everything is saved. I would run it. I would type in my values, and then I would grab a screenshot from there by just doing a new one. And I might just do something like that. And then we're done. Of course, copy and pasting it into the document, putting in any comments that you think are necessary. So that is basically the completion here of the property tax VB problem and the property tax pseudocode. So that concludes this video.